Damsels in Dialogue, a podcast dedicated to the female protagonists in fiction, film, and the stage. Co-hosted by Katie Zutter
and India Marie Paul. For our fourth season, we take a deep dive into the leading ladies of the Golden Age musicals and discuss just how well these Hollywood and Broadway characters have aged.
This episode, we take a transatlantic cruise filled with rich men, Olympians, and two women who discover diamonds are a girl's best friend. Join us as we find out if gentlemen prefer blondes.
Welcome, everyone, as we go into a fun Hollywood adventure and Broadway adventure, because I honestly didn't know it was a Broadway musical before it was a Hollywood movie.
It was made so famous by Marilyn Monroe.
Yep. And Jane Russell, what a duo.
Yeah, it was so iconic. So how, I don't know.
Well, that's this is probably the musical on our list I knew the least about. I remember liking the movie. So I
agree. Same with me. I'm surprised by you not knowing it.
I knew I liked it, and I had seen it before, and I knew we were trying to find a musical that we hadn't known that much about, but was still part of the Golden Age. So I was really excited to do Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Also because it has a very enticing name that I might hate this musical or not. So I was also excited.
Controversial name, if you will.
Yeah, yes, that's a better word. It could be really offensive. Someone's like, maybe that's why it doesn't have many revivals. I think there might be a couple of reasons, but we will get there. So I was even more excited when I started diving into the origins of this Broadway show Hollywood movie, because it was originally a novel by a woman named Anita Loos that was published in 1925. So this was a Flappers era novel. It's the same year as Great Gatsby. So that's where we're at. We're in the F. Scott Fitzgerald era of America. And it was titled Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, The Intimate Diary of a Professional Lady. Mm-hmm. So in 1912, Anita Loos became the first female staff screenwriter in Hollywood because she was put on payroll.
Cool.
This is 1912. I was like, okay, this is suffragette movement. That's before women could vote. And she was on payroll at Triangle Film Corporation. And I'll probably go a little bit more into her in the after hours because it's not exactly about her.
I'd love to hear about it.
She's really cool. I'm like, okay. But she is best known for the comic novel of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And she also did the 1951 Broadway adaptation book of Gigi.
Nice.
She was very much involved in the Broadway musical, but not the Hollywood movie adaptation.
In We Like Paris? Does she have a thing for Paris?
Maybe they're like, oh, you've done Paris before. Here, go. Right. It's like her, know what you're known for. But she's very open about the inspiration. She actually writes a biography of the story in the beginning of her novel, so you can read through why she wrote it, which is really fun to get her take on it rather than a whole bunch of opinions. It started out as sketches in a Harper's Bazaar magazine. And how it even got there was she was working as a screenwriter, and she was about, I think, 40. She was in her 30s or 40s when this was written too. And she was inspired because she writes, I was allowed to lug heavy suitcases from their racks while men sat about and failed to note my efforts. And then she saw a young 14-year-old blonde happened to drop the novel she was reading, and several men jumped up to retrieve it. Mm-hmm. And she noted that she was an attractive woman. She was an actress at one point as well. But she started to notice the striking contrast between men's behavior to her versus the popular blonde look. This is also noted in Chicago, where they talk about the 20s when Roxy goes blonde, is blonde and has that kind of stuff.
That's still a thing that never stopped.
Yes, the dumb blonde trope is very much a thing.
Well, not the dumb blonde, just in general, the gentlemen prefer blonde thing. Yeah, is and we can talk more about this in after hours because it doesn't have anything to do with the show. But it is notoriously a sexist, but mainly racist phrasing. Yeah. So just want to throw that out there, but we will discuss in after hours. I can't wait.
It is, I think, she noticed that, which I think is important. Sure. And she also...
that's still a thing. It's
definitely relevant.
It's not a good thing.
No, it's not a good thing, but it's a relevant thing. And so she was drafting a story after having an incident with a friend, Henry Mencken, who was having being really, really flirty with a blonde actress. And she wrote a skit poking fun at his romance. And she had no thought of it being printed. I was only trying to make Henry laugh, making fun of him being stupid around a pretty girl. Right. And then he ended up reading it and loving it, finding it hilarious about himself, and then forwarded it to Henry Sell, who was the editor of the Harper's Bazaar. Cool. And then the story like exploded in there. And it was she made fun. Why is she so cool? I have a lot of feelings, which I'm like trying to like form in my head. She was really cool in the sense that she was very upset with the censorship that began to happen in Hollywood in the 30s. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, and all that feelings were coming out in this book too, because it's pokes fun at sex. The 20s were very much, the flapper era was about the sexual freedom that women were trying to get after finally getting the right to vote as well. Mm-hmm. And she was very much the product of that. And so she made fun and satirized women doing like having sexual exploits and it being fine. And she put all of that in the Harper's Bazaar comics some of the original illustrations are in the books you can buy, which is really fun. But some people were a little worried about the risque nature of these little satirical comics and thought that Harper's Bazaar was the right place for them because it could be like hidden with the ads. Like that's not, people aren't going to mind. But it exploded. And eventually she got asked if she wanted to run like a book published, like more like to give it to her family and friends and stuff than anything else. Yeah. And it sold out the day it arrived in bookstores.
Nice.
So they had to do a second running of it. But it was this skit, and she created this character of Lorelei Lee that was a flapper, that was hyper intelligent. She made fun of a lot of political things with her by making her a dumb blonde, quote unquote, who just said things that were very sharp and witty, got what she wanted because men were stupid because of her looks. Yeah. So I think it was such an interesting turn on its head of the trope that it already existed, that Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is, the title itself is loose, making fun of men because of the trope of the blonde woman. Mm-hmm. So in that way, like the title is the perfect satirization of what she's doing, even if it is a more controversial idea, because the satire is a hard thing. Satire is a hard balance of joke versus like serious material. The response to it, the literary critics, some thought it was going to be the most enduring, like I think it was F. Scott Fitzgerald, James Joyce, William Faulkner, H.G. Wells, like loved it. Like they thought it was amazing. And I think Edith Wharton, I think is a famous critic, I gotta look her up, hailed it as the greatest American novel.
Amazing.
Like it was just, and it was like listening to most of it, like it's written as a diary of Lorelei Lee talking about what's happening to her and like the men that come and the gifts that she gets. And it's just so dripping with sarcasm. And some of the stuff goes over my head because it's a satire of very specific events and people that aren't popular knowledge. So like some of it I read about, this is satirical of this. I'm like, I would never have known that. But it was very much of its time making fun of.
It's very pop culture-y.
Yes, very pop culture-y.
Yeah.
So she created this wonderful character. She went on to there was a stage adaptation in 1926. And it ran for 201 performances. It wasn't like a huge success, but they had that. The script has been lost. There also apparently was a film version that is now lost.
Yep, that was because that was like done before like the book really came out.
It was in 1928. So it was like right a couple years after that first release.
Because they started filming it before, which is wild. Like I looked at when I saw that, I was so confused because I'm like, Marilyn Monroe? And different movie.
Yep. Well, and we'll talk a little bit more in the after hours about the Hays Code that she was a part of Hollywood in the pre-coded Hollywood from 1929 to 1934 is like known as the pre-code Hollywood. So this is after Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, but I want to talk about it in the after hours. So I'm going to note that because there's an entire like what happened to women and the taking away agency from women in Hollywood, which would have been the same time that the movie would have been affected by it and the musical would have been affected by it, but not the original story itself. But she has a very cynical view of the world, which just comes out.
Who she? The
Anita
writer
Loos.
or the
Anita Loos. Yeah, Lorelei Lorelai is the epitome of wise but not intelligent, because there's those little comments of like common knowledge she just doesn't have, but like she get like her ability to move up in the world in the way that she believes she would like is so good. And there was a really good use of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes as an example of women's sexuality, and like written in like the 70s, there's an article and it says that the emancipated woman of the 20s with either a suffragette or a flapper, depending on what she wanted and how she chose to get it. For the Anita Loos flapper, who wanted social and sexual rather than political and intellectual power, this was the gold-plated philosophy. As long as she played dumb, she could stay in her pedestal. So it's that like, how do you get what you want in the situation that you're in the oppressive nature that was women's lives and is women's lives. Right. So it's you can like it or hate it. Like that's like this, you can love or hate Lorelai Lee, which I think is valid on both sides of it. But I wasn't a big fan of, in the novel, Lorelai Lee ends up with Henry in Philadelphia.
Okay. Oh.
And
interesting.
Rather than Dorothy. So there are things that were taken from the novel into the Broadway that then was transferred into the movie. It actually evolved and changed in each iteration, which I thought was really interesting, rather than like sticking to one thing, which makes sense because it was a comic strip turned into like vignetted arc of a story and then had to become its own fully fledged story.
And that original author wrote this as well?
So she wrote the stage adaptation, and then she was a part of the book writing of the musical. So the musical Gentlemen Prefer Blondes opened in December of 1949, and it ran for 740 performances. So well done. And it opened in the West End in 1962. There was a Broadway revival in 95 with the Encore series that likes to remount more unknown shows.
Yeah.
There were 2 Broadway producers who wanted the musical version of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and they brought in Joseph Fields as a co-author. So Anita Loos was a book writer with him. You had Jewel Stein and Lee Robin as the music and lyric team, who did who did Gypsy. I think Jewel Stein did Gypsy. Did they do Wonderful Town? I don't know. They were like around. They're not.
Yes.
They're not. They would never got as famous.
Those names, I'm like, I know them.
Yeah, it's like I know the names. They're not as famous as Rodgers and Hammerstein and all that. But Loos threatened to quit the production unless assured she would never have to speak to Fields again during this process.
Amazing.
And I tried so hard to find out why.
Like, why? No.
Like, that's all I got was she hated him.
Sick of him. Sick of that man.
So I'm trying to think of like what he possibly could have done. And maybe he, thinking about the Broadway show, the men in it, what I actually prefer, this is jumping a little bit ahead, but I prefer the movie to the musical for a couple different reasons. But I think the biggest reason...
There's a lot of articles on that, to be honest. When I was like looking up stuff about, there's a ton of articles about the musical and how feminist the movie musical is. And little to no articles about the play musical.
It was hard. It was hard to find things.
You're like totally just validating your point more.
Yes, but it was really hard. It was really hard to find things on the Broadway musical, other than the fact that it was Carol Channing's breakout role.
Right.
Like she had done a couple of things, but this was like her breakout role. And then she went to go on and do Hello, Dolly. Classic Carol Channing, which is so funny to think of Carol Channing as Lorelai Lee and then Marilyn Monroe. Like how different can that take?
Different human beings
can be on her. And I've seen a couple videos of Carol Channing singing it, and she's fabulous. But
you prefer the movie.
I prefer the movie, and the biggest reason is that the movie takes away the leading man.
That's how it should be.
I'm completely conjecturing. I'm hitting things now. I'm completely conjecturing on this point, but I have to believe that part of why Anita Loos was mad at Justin Fields is maybe he pushed the men more in it.
I mean,
I don't know.
Not wrong.
It sounds like it could be in my hypothetical.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the Taming of the Shrew versus Kiss Me Kate, and you like Kiss Me Kate so much better because the women are in control, as opposed to the men. And in this, it's the same way. It's less gross. It's like it's more feminist this way when they're in the lead and they are the ones with the agency.
Yeah.
You know?
And it just felt like it was still the Lorelei Lee she wrote, but it was less focused on the friendship in the Broadway musical. And there is some songs I'm like, okay, like why are we singing about chili and tingling and like there's some things where I'm like, and the men in the Broadway musical were very like masculine, like the idea of like they almost come to fisticuffs at one point. And I'm like, that's not even close. Like I was exposed to the Hollywood movie first and I went, what is this crap? Like that's not what the men are like at all.
Right. It's almost like one was written for the male gaze and another was written for the female gaze.
Well, and that's what makes me so disappointed that Anita Loos was not part of the she was still alive. Like she just wasn't part of it. And she was actually very happy with the choice to cast Marilyn Monroe in it, which I thought was sweet
too. Good for her, yeah.
But yeah, she had during rehearsals, apparently her and Joseph Fields sat on opposite sides of the theater and the director had to move back and forth between them.
My
God. And then he had to
the return of the petty, guys. Return of the petty. So no longer love drama.
And I wish I had the tea of why. I just wish, and I don't. And I'm sorry. I tried. But there was Carol Channing. Like they looked for a lot of through a lot of different people. They wanted a big star for Lorelei Lee. Carol Channing wasn't really a big star at this point, but her auditions and her interpretation of it, they just kept circling back to her audition.
That's cool.
Like for the months that they were looking. And so like they pretty much felt like they had to go with her. It was her comedic genius and her wit and her uniqueness. Cause she has like one of the most unique voices.
Oh, for sure.
Out there. Which when I think of the dumb blonde trope that Lorelei Lee is satirizing, I don't think of a husky deep voice.
No, not at all.
But she like, despite all that, like they felt they had to cast her. So her take on it must have been this iconic version of Lorelei Lee. And you can see she performs the crap out of it when you see a couple of clips of her doing it in the nice black and white YouTube clips. But I feel like I couldn't find things about how she made the role her own, but she definitely did. Like she was constantly praised for it. Like the show was a hit. It didn't win like a whole bunch of awards or things, but it was very much a fun evening at the theater. They're very showgirly, that kind of stuff. So it got great reviews. Which also
makes sense why the movie just popped off.
Yeah.
And why we know the movie more than the musical. If the musical was just like, which we've talked about this. I feel like this era of musicals is so much, you are just going to the theater for fun. You know, you like.
It's an escape.
You're right? Yeah. That's what you're doing. So I wonder if just that little bit of time difference and adding the Marilyn Monroe star power and rewriting just a touch, you know, in the movie is truly what made all the difference and made it succeed. Because like without that movie, would this musical would it have been redone?
I don't think it would have. Like I mean,
you and I are musical theater people, and we didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, I was like, oh crap, it's a musical. I was like, oh great,
yeah.
And I read it, and I was a little disappointed because I love the movie so much. I'm like, wow, the friendship is just less. Like they just spend less time together. There's so much music in it, and it feels forced. But
it's a bummer that they don't. Like again, the plot of the movie is they both like are dealing with men the whole time. Yeah. Like that's the whole point.
Yeah.
But it is a bummer that it doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
That was sad.
Because anytime they're talking, it's about men, and I do get it because
that's the focus of the story.
Point.
Yeah,
but
like it
was a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah, I'm like I looked. I'm like, wow, it doesn't pass it. But they have so many scenes together.
Yeah, they talk a lot.
They talk a lot together. I mean, and there's some iconic moments, like reading through the Broadway script, like Dorothy enters on a luggage cart pushed by 4 Olympic boys. Like, what an entrance, you know? And Dorothy gets so much more space in the movie version because in the play version, it's very much like Lorelei picks a guy for her and then she ends up falling in love with him. You know, there's not a lot of scenes with them together. They're not even like duets hardly with them together, I think, at all.
I can recall.
Even the little girl from Little Rock is hilarious, but it's a solo. Like it's they're
my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, like there's not really a duet with them. which was just, there's a random like Gloria ballerina like person, like there's just a lot of external.
That's wild. How did my brain and I put that together? Because they spend so much time together on stage.
Yeah.
And not even like together, like yes, in group scenes, but together like alone.
And they never,
compared to other musicals that we talked about, like they spend a decent amount of time alone.
They do. And that's why I like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I feel weird about it.
That's like a missed opportunity.
It really is. And there's a whole, like, I think it is a little bit closer to using some stuff that was in the book itself, which is also probably why I think as it grew, it got better, because they used what worked in the novel and then made their own story pretty much.
Yeah.
Still based on like the transatlantic cruise was part of the Lorelai novel, and her with Gus the Button King like heir, like that was all part of it.
So ridiculous.
Oh my god! Like in the musical, the whole like zipper button rivalry is hilarious,
just insane. And all I could think of is, because of course you have to like think of Marilyn Monroe while you're doing this. Yes. All I could think of was that damn dress that had to be sewn onto her.
Yep.
There's nothing to do with this musical or anything.
Yep.
But there's no clothes just because it had to be sewn onto her. And then Kim Kardashian wrecking it. That's all I could think of.
Yeah.
During such a random side tangent. So sorry, that should have been for after hours bonus, after hours content in the regular episode.
Totally fine. Yes. Well, and then I have a whole thing about like Marilyn I will only touch on because there's also more stuff for that.
For sure, I'm sure.
But Lorelai, in what I didn't like about the musical was that Lorelai and Dorothy weren't nearly as like friend oriented. It wasn't about that. It was really like more like situational comedy. Like they were friends, but it wasn't. And even in the novel, like Dorothy was a friend, but in the movie, there's so much defending of each other.
Yeah, right.
Like
they're close.
They're super
They're not
close.
just sent there to be a chaperone.
Yeah, exactly. And this one, it feels like she is a friend, but she's not like, they don't have those moments of defending each other or anything in the musical. And Lorelai feels more like a manipulator in the musical, which could be good or bad depending on what you want out of Lorelai.
Right.
Because she thinks that Gus is going to break up with her anyway because of her past. So she goes and tries to find other people. And in the movie, she has she's like, Gus loves me, I'm fine.
Yeah,
like she's not worried about herself. But in the musical, she's actively like looking for rich people. You know, which plays more into like...
that like undermines...
Yeah.
I mean, granted, that's more of the time period.
Yeah.
You know, is like getting the leg up in the world, and the only way to do it is find somebody wealthy. But like, it makes sense that even with just that little tidbit, that the movie would be is already more feminist.
Yeah, it
on
is.
Just that stance.
It is, and that's like the core of the satire and stuff I love. But it's those little things like in the Broadway musical, Lorelai gets Sir Francis Beekman to come over because she's going to borrow money from him to buy the tiara. Right. From Lady Beekman, which is like a whole thing, and she dresses in negligee.
Because you have to have an awkward subplot with like robbers, cops, something.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway,
exactly.
Anyway, what were you saying?
but it says that she dresses in negligee when he comes over to like before they do the Down to Chili song. But like in the Hollywood version, she isn't, all she wants is the diamond tiara. It's not about him. It's not about like overly seducing him as much as being like, I just think it's
really
pretty.
Want that.
I really want it. You're so great. It'd be even greater if I had a tiara. Like
yeah.
Like it's not.
She's not like it. I don't know. It feels less scummy because it's not. I'm using sex appeal. To do it. It's more, which is get your bankroll.
Well, it's
more cleverly manipulative and more empowering because she doesn't have to do that.
Yeah,
to get them to listen to her.
Yeah, and it actually makes the men look more.
Oh, it makes them
stupid.
For sure, for sure, because they're getting everything they want if they walk in and see her in negligee.
Exactly, like that's it. Just I think
that's just what they want.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that part of it feels better in the Hollywood movie. So like, I would still recommend like getting to know it because it is a relatively unknown musical.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that if they would truly revive it, it would need to be leaning harder towards what they did in the Hollywood version of it.
I feel like they'd have to, even regardless of like just the political stuff. with how big
it was.
Marilyn Monroe made it, I feel like you have
Jane
to
Russell.
more match. Yeah. Oh yeah, but she's the one who Marilyn's the one who did it. Like Jane Russell is a big actress, but like you can't compete with Marilyn Monroe.
Well,
like, you know,
that's what's funny is now you can't.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
it's now that's what everybody knows. Who can't if they see that pink dress with the bow and the pearls.
Yep.
Nobody could tell you even where that's from, but they know Marilyn Monroe sang it.
Yep.
You know, so yes, at the time they were both big, but Jane Russell did not.
No, she wasn't an icon.
She's not the reason. She's not the reason people know it today.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's
Marilyn
so
Monroe
funny.
Is the reason.
What's so funny is I dug into the history of the music. So we'll that's Broadway. We're going to move to the Hollywood version.
Yes.
So it was produced in 1953, directed by Howard Hawks and adapted by Charles Lederer. So Anita Loos not involved in the rewriting of it, approved Marilyn's Monroe. Like no one asked her for approval, but she's like, that's inspired. That's great.
Awesome though.
Yeah. I thought that was really
awesome
really cool.
for her to take a step out. And because clearly there was no bad blood.
Yeah. Like there was.
Like, if, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, and
that's great.
What I loved about learning about what behind the scenes of the movie is that Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe got along great.
That's awesome.
There was no controversy. Like she
that's so nice because she's had such shitty sets to work out. Like Marilyn has. I don't know about Jane, but like so for them to truly enjoy each other's company. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised about that because you can see the like friend chemistry.
Yeah.
In the film.
You really can't. And I was just, my heart just went, oh, thank goodness. There was no drama. It was just that they were nice. And Jane Russell was the star of this. Like she has top billing. She was the more famous actress at this time. Marilyn Monroe was getting it stardom. Right. But she was still she was paid I think it was $1,500 a week or some like
she
low
wasn't the
number.
Icon yet.
No.
She is.
Yeah.
Now.
and this movie helped transition her career because what it did is they were trying her at a lot more serious stuff and it just wasn't clicking.
Right.
And then they debated whether or not they were even going to let her do this movie because it was the under contract aspect of Hollywood at that point. And Marilyn finally was allowed to be funny. And that's where she made her bank.
Yeah.
She goes on right after this is How to Marry a Millionaire, which is essentially a very similar character as this, which is why I also love that movie as well. But they let her be funny and it clicked. And so this was a huge turning point, and to the point where in a story conference for the film, Daryl F. Zanuck, which I think was a producer, and director Howard Hawks suggested to Zanuck that the studio should change Marilyn's look for the movie and her screen persona a bit. So instead of just being the bombshell, they wanted her to have a little more sophistication. So her clothes in it are very simple and clean and cover up a lot more than in previous movies. So they wanted her to have a different look. So I think there was a quote from Jane Russell's biography or one of the producer's biographies or something that in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, the keynote of Marilyn's costumes would be simplicity. Her dresses would be flashy enough, but only in terms of color and sparkle. Otherwise, the emphasis was on strong, simple, clean lines. And Hawks also ordered a total makeover. Marilyn sat patiently as various makeups were tried on her hair set and colored until the director pronounced every element exactly right. There's a lot of things that are wrong with this. There's a lot of things that are wrong with this image I've just put where she is treated as a doll and they're giving her a look. But at that point, studios owned their actresses. Right. Which is why now we have a union. Right. So what the shift did for Marilyn was change her trajectory to become the big icon that she was. Rather than just making her a bombshell, they made her a leading lady, essentially. Right. So as gross as that, the idea of what they were doing was, the shift is evident. This movie.
I do like the idea, though, of especially if you're trying to not build necessarily a person, although people do that still today with marketing yourself, but building a character and taking this person who you're trying to make work in this role and putting them in different costumes and different designs to see what lays right. I kind of like that because you can tell from there was a recent movie that we will not mention because I hate it. And nobody should watch it. But about Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, yes.
And I saw a clip side by side of Diamonds Are Girl's Best Friend. And I had not noticed until you said that the new movie that came out, actress is just fine, but the dress is form fitted. Like the color matches, it's still the same. Like there's a big bow, there's still pearls, but it is form fitted to every curve. Now, Marilyn, and you can see this because she moves a lot during this number. This is not just like a park and bark. Like she's being lifted by men. She's walking. She's doing stuff in this dress that I can't imagine her walking abilities are very good. You know, it's definitely like a statement piece, not a moving around thing. But you can see in the bodice when she moves that it, because I mean, she was gifted. She's a very curvy lady, you know, and she looks so elegant, sophisticated. And when she bends a little bit, you see the fabric that I would assume, like you said, is giving those clean lines, is making her form a little more elegant as opposed to traditional sexy. And for this role, I think that's brilliant because once again, it's not using straight up, here I'm in negligee. It's I am outwitting you. Using my prettiness. You know, so I think that's so clever. And that's something that really hit the mark. And I love that. You said that because it's true. She looks almost like a different human being.
She looks stunning
in those stuff versus and don't get me wrong, she's great in those form-fitting things as well. But it's truly like this is the character and not Marilyn Monroe, which I think is so cool. That's so cool. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, and that's what I think the epitome of what we're saying here is that like men are stupid because of her hair color, not because of her boobs. Like, and that's the joke. That's the joke that Loos was making. This entire time. So I think,
and that's why it does it so well in the movie. Oh my gosh, yes.
I love that. And it was a cool thing to discover. And there's even more drama about the pink dress that that's more of an after hours thing. There's even more of a story, but it is iconic. Like Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend is iconic. And I really think they lifted 3 songs from the movie. There's only 5 songs in the entire musical movie.
Yeah, there's not many.
And it partially was because Russell and Monroe were not singers and dancers.
Right.
They were not known for that. Like Jane Russell, star actress, but not like musicals. Like that's not what she was really about.
Marilyn Monroe can sing.
Oh yeah,
she's not a bad singer, but that's not like her bread and butter.
Yeah, and she actually, Marilyn, I don't know if this is true, because I've read that like this line, I've read that she suggested this line, and I've also read that she wasn't a huge fan of the line, so I don't know which one it is, but it's the "I can be smart when it's important, but most men don't like it" line in the movie. And I have written down that she suggested it, but I vaguely remember like that line being controversial, whether or not it's because she thought so or other people thinks it controversial. Because I think it's very interesting. I can be smart when it's important, but most men don't like it is a huge kick at guys not liking smart women.
Yes.
So I enjoy that. But so going back to Jane and Marilyn, because I know
their friendship,
because I think like it influenced the characters, which is why I want to harp on it. And the fact that there's like friendship behind the scenes makes me so happy.
Well, it's kind of like last time we talked about like all of the real married couples who are involved in the marriage. Like, I don't know how does that not filter into the art that you're doing, you know?
And the joy that they are to watch in the movie, because this was a point of time when Marilyn began having paralyzing anxiety and insecurity, and she would arrive an hour before Russell, but then be late to set because of it.
Be panicking.
Exactly. So she was having those issues, and Russell found out and made it a point to go and like help her get from her dressing room to the set.
Oh, that's so nice of her.
That she called Monroe Blondie as a nickname on set. She was often the only one who could coax Monroe out of her trailer for the day's filming.
Wow.
So she was someone who like saw that, and instead of being mad about it, like saw like understood how hard it was. And there were gossip columnists who like tried very hard to like have a feud gossip about them on set, and they were not able to. because it was so untrue. In her autobiography, Jane Russell credited their fast friendship with their shared zodiac sign, which is a Gemini. Woo-woo.
We love that. Girls ahead of their time.
Yes, yes. And Russell recalled that she was married to an athlete at the time, and Monroe, who was dating Joe DiMaggio, asked Russell what it was like to be married to an athlete. And Russell told Monroe that other than the fact that athletes tend to spend a lot of time with other athletes, it was great. So like they were talking about these marriage and relationships on set. There's great photos of them in their Little Rock outfits, like sitting on the stage, smiling with each other, like while they're not filming. And like, so it's just so wholesome to like just see two famous actresses enjoying working together.
Yeah, especially if at the time they were so different.
Yes.
As far as like their social status. You know, it's not like potentially this may have been the first time they met. Yeah. If Jane was so massive and Monroe was given this scrap of a chance. Yeah. You know, like that's really, really cool.
Yeah. And because they weren't dancers, they had Jack Cole, who was famous for teaching non-dancing stars how to look like they can dance.
An icon.
So well done, Jack Cole. Who's
hard job. Someone's got to do it.
Right? His assistant was Gwen Verdon, who reportedly really helped Russell and Marilyn on their walk and their dance. And Marilyn would practice her numbers with Jane Russell and the choreographer, and then drove herself to exhaustion like hours after Russell would be done because she wanted to get it perfect. So like she worked her butt off during this. She didn't want to go home. She wanted to make sure it was right. She asked for more takes when she didn't think she got it. Like you can see like that anxiety coming up, but you can tell.
Asking for more takes at that time period was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Because it was physical roles, and that is not cheap. It is not cheap to like just retake it as many times as possible. Like now it's digital, it's easy peasy. But that at the time, wow. Yep. Good for her.
Yep. Yep.
Well, have that agency, ask for another take.
Yeah.
Do it.
I love that. So it's like her work ethic was around, like Jane Russell saw that. Like Jane Russell liked the choreographer enough that Jane Russell actually produced I haven't seen it yet or read the novel, but there's a sequel to Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which is But Gentlemen Marry Brunettes. Is Loos's sequel.
Fun.
Which I thought was really cool. And Jane Russell ended up hiring that choreographer for when she produced that movie, which I think is based more on Dorothy. So like she takes that one. But it was a very successful film at the time. What I think worked and why I think the movie was so successful too is that they tailored the story to Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe and their strengths. They took away the leading man. Like there's guys in it, but they are not.
They're not the same people that are in the musical. No, they're not.
They're just not. And they completely reimagined the character of Henry Spofford, who is the original love interest of Dorothy that Lorelai picks out in the musical. Yep. And they made him an 8-year-old boy. Which is he's so funny in the movie. Like it's just so like they made her love interest not a rich man too, which plays into Dorothy's not wanting a rich guy. So I thought that was so cool that the actresses really influence those two now iconic characters in this version of the story. Yeah, I thought that's really, really cool. And the screen adaptation was done by Charles Lederer, who was inspired for Lorelei Lee by his aunt, who was the silent screen superstar Marion Davies. So also he was influenced by Marilyn Monroe, but also by the mannerisms of his aunt, which I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Who was, in her own right.
Yeah. She's a silent screen star.
Like that's not that long ago for them. For us, it was like 1,000 years ago. For them. Yeah. Like that's so interesting. Because she would have to have very strong mannerisms to get it across the stage because there are no words. So how fun.
It's fun. And they brought it to the modern time. Like they brought it to 53 rather than putting it in the flapper era, which I also think made it very successful.
Yes. I don't know. And it was ahead of its time too, because it was doing things that were very of the times of the next like women's rights movement, but they were like a couple years early.
Yeah,
which was really cool.
It was directed by a guy. It was written by a guy. It surrounded it shined on these two starlets, and somehow in that they made a very feminist movie.
They really did.
I was really like, I remember I was like, oh, let's try this one for the podcast. I like the movie. And then I rewatched it. I went, oh, I really like this movie. Like, oh, okay. I remembered correctly. Good.
Thank goodness.
Right? Cool. Could have been bad. You never know. You never know.
Yeah, truly.
They kept 3 songs. They kept Bye Bye Baby, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, and a little girl from Little Rock in the movie.
Yes.
They added 2 numbers written by a different team, Ain't There Anyone Here for Love, which is very close to one of the songs Dorothy has in the musical. It's just flavored a little bit differently. And When Love Goes Wrong. So there's only 5 numbers, which I think is all it needed because of what it gave. The writing is so many one-liners for Jane Russell and so much moments for both of them to talk. Like so we can move into like the movie itself.
Yeah.
Like how did, like, what were have you ever watched it before, or what was your reaction to things?
I had not watched it before. I will say something about it that I would argue it's not a movie musical.
That's fair.
Instead, a movie with music. And I think that's another reason that it has done so well.
Yes.
Because like not as many people relate to people bursting out into songs like we do.
Yep.
So I think, and having one of the numbers be like a very obvious showgirl number. Like this is not a like Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend is not like her inner monologue. Like that is, she is performing because that's her job. Like that's
and so it's like Little Rock Girl. Like that's like those are
like, they're very, this like show within a show kind of concept.
Yeah.
So I think that's another reason that it did do so well. But no, I definitely thought it was very fun, a little silly. Obviously there was still some stuff that as I found with some of these plays, not all of them, but occasionally they'll like reference stuff, kind of like we talked about this, where I'm like, was that supposed to be?
Is it funny?
Supposed to understand what that was? I don't know. Now, like, not mad about it. Just like clearly, as all media and art forms will have like a strong tie to like pop culture, and I feel like there was every once in a while they'd like say stuff, and I'm like, what? But I'm glad to know that they were friends because like I said, I shouldn't be surprised because their chemistry was great. Both of them clearly were more fun. Than anyone else in the film.
Yep. Well, not
that the film was bad. It was good. It's just they were clearly the stars.
They were, and what I loved about this musical and the story and the movie specifically digs most at it is the friendship. Like they are two opposite people. Like their views on what romance should be are completely polar opposites.
Totally different.
And I love that because they're still best, like to the point where they're so like best friends to the point where Dorothy like straight up says, you don't get to say bad things about Lorelai. Only I do. Like that, like very like they defend each other. There's no cattiness. There's no jealousy. There's no like fighting. They are always a team.
Right. And that, I don't know.
That's
so
unique.
important. That's it's great. Like, cause you mentioned at the beginning of this, I'm trying to get my thoughts right. You mentioned at the beginning of this season, this was the rise of the female duet, which like a bummer this doesn't have. But I would argue this is the rise of just like 2 women main characters. Like because so many of the shows that we've talked about, even from the start, White Christmas, it's 2 sisters. You know, there's some misinformations, crisscross lines, but they're defending each other. You have 2 friends defending each other. Kiss Me Kate didn't have that as much because it's just the 2 women, but they were friends, but it wasn't about their friendship.
Were like, and My Fair Lady was one of the few that was solo based.
Yeah, very few that was solo.
But we have like a couple women to talk about or more in every single
every one. So that's really cool to have. That,
it is.
Especially of the era. You know, we keep talking about how some of these characters age really well for the era. Now they might not be great, but like
I really
don't know if
that
made sense. That
it
random ramble,
did.
But
Like I think it's really great to see female friendship. Like I wish there was more female friendship on stage, and I think it is a huge step because they defend each other. The miscommunication is never with each other, and as soon what hit me was like with Dorothy, she was falling in love with what's his face, and I forget what his name is in the movie because they're different names. The private investigator, and then as soon as she sees him take a photo that could be incriminating of her friend, she goes, dead to me.
Goodbye.
I love that so
See you
much.
later.
There wasn't enough like, oh, you were doing your job. Like, it was very much like, goes into the room, kicks Piggy out and goes, what were you doing? This is what happened. We got to get him. We can't let him know we're on to us. Like they scheme.
I love that.
Like, it's so great. And I have to say, the Olympians half naked was for women in this time.
1,000%.
Like, the men are more scantily clothed in this movie.
Well, that's why
because of that scene.
The movie seems a little more tailored to women.
Yeah.
Like more of the female gaze than the musical.
Yeah. It's that whole number. That whole number I went, good for you, Hollywood.
Right.
Like, we finally have a show boy number. Like
a show boy number.
Like, granted, it's like athletes, so it's a little more like acceptable masculinity, but
but still, I think it's a show boy number now.
All of them are in tiny shorts and like exercising the entire number.
Show boy number.
Good for you, Jane Russell. Like, well done. And I love that Dorothy is like. I love that Lorelai is the practical one of the group. And she's played as the like practical in the sense of like money is important. Like,
for sure.
I love those opposing, like they tell each other, they're both trying to help each other, thinking that what their view is better, but they're never actively like working against each other. Like,
no.
Lorelai's trying to set up Dorothy with someone who's rich, and Dorothy's trying to protect, because Dorothy tries to get Piggy away from Lorelai when she finds out he owns a diamond mine. She's like, you can't talk to my friend. And then Lorelai shows up and finds out he owns a diamond mine. But like that she's actively trying to like make sure her friend isn't distracted by diamonds.
Right.
And that flaw is hilarious. Like when they put in the diamond picture over Piggy's head.
Oh my god.
I was like, wow, this is campy. And I love it.
We love camp. We love a good camp.
It's just because she talks about actually like Lorelai likes Gus. She likes the way he is to her after the fact that he was rich. She does like him as a person.
Right.
So like it's this whole conversation of like, is there a right and wrong for a romance? Like the whole speech at the end to the dad that how is what I'm doing wrong? Like, why can't I say I'm marrying for money? Oh. So I think it's an interesting, like I love reading romance novels. I love a good like, we have no money, but we're in love, like situation. Yeah. But I think it's really interesting to tell that side of the reality of things, which is people don't like to hear that, which is why Lorelai Lee in general was scandalous.
Right.
Because we're talking about money and girls wanting it in a way that makes us go, oh, I guess, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, they have fully fledged thoughts and ideas. Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
They're also human beings. What a concept.
I love it.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, and I know this was after, but it's the same thing with the Bianca character of last week's episode.
Yeah.
She also did the same thing with her sexuality and was confident. It was like, this is it. I'm not asking for anything. Like, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love the agency that women have on their own sexuality. Yeah. In these past couple ones that we've talked about.
Oh yeah. And Dorothy like does what she wants with who she wants and is that's just what it is. Like there's no judgment on it. It's just enjoyment of that idea. I think there's so many versions of what an independent woman can be, and you see two very different versions in this movie and musical, which I love. I love that when Gus comes crawling back, Lorelai's like, "You're dead to me." Like I love like there's so much like power that women have over men in this, which is satirical in some sense, but like is just honest. Like Dorothy has power over men because she's fun and she like has a wonderful personality and is beautiful. Right. And Lorelai has power over men because she doesn't take their crap either. Like she says exactly what she wants. She flat out says, I wrote this down. When she's talking to Piggy, she's like, it's only fair I have her tiara, she has you.
Yep.
Like, sounds about right. Purely like manipulative, like great, but just flat out was like, I want that. I want your wife's precious tiara.
Going to have that. Thank you.
And doesn't want to give it back because it was a gift. Wow. And watching Jane Russell do a Marilyn Monroe impression was Stunning.
Things we never knew we needed.
It's just like, yeah, like her going to her friend's defense, like she could end up in jail, and then like Love winning out in that moment because she like, hey, I would never forgive you if you did this to my friend.
Accurate.
We got the classic double marriage ending, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We got to go. The human candelabras were weird.
Yes.
And Diamond, our girl's best friend. That was weird to me. That was the one part of the movie I went,
I don't know. The whole scene is very showy and campy, so that didn't bother me as much.
I wasn't offended by it. I just went, I guess we're doing that. Like, I guess we're just having women just holding on to the chandelier.
It's fine. Casual.
Yep. There's a moment that Lorelai looks at Dorothy and says, "Why did you just stand there and let him kiss you?" Like that they're also like calling each other on like when they're not in control. Like, I don't know. There's something about that friendship and the defense of each other and the scheming together and the just unbridled loyalty to each other that it's just fascinating to me, that I love, and why I would like to see a play with music version of this Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe, because it's just so witty and so fun.
So it sounds like this show, the original source material, groundbreaking, hysterical. I'm sure in comic form, like you said, would age a little better. Yep. Musical, okay. Yeah. But the movie, aged phenomenally.
It's one of those rare moments.
Two strong women.
Yeah. Like it's one of those rare moments where like it got better, I feel, as it aged. As far as like its progression. Like I feel like the best version of Dorothy Shaw and Lorelai Lee exist in the movie. Which I hate to say because Anita Loos is the creator, but her galvanizing this satire of a blonde flapper was revolutionary at the time. Yeah. And the fact that it was taken and grew and got better and better as it aged, I think is really interesting. Because so many times I'm like, man, the original was so much like more fun or so much more feminist or so much like it. Right. I think it kept the essence. I don't think it created a different version of Lorelai Lee. I just think it focused on the more interesting parts of it in the movie, I think.
I like it. I like two strong, independent women. You love, I don't know. That's also a big trope that's really popular right now, especially in romance, is like kind of the soft butterfly flower character and then like the prickly badass. And I feel like now that's an extreme take of what these two characters are. But, they're not quite that far. But as friends, it's giving me those vibes.
Well, yeah. And like the sassy one-liners that Jane Russell has as Dorothy Shaw, like we're built for her and are amazing. And then Lorelai is much softer in how she gets what she wants. So it's I love the opposing ideas of how to get it, which goes back to like the suffragette versus the flapper, you know, like in the one of the things I had mentioned earlier, like it's that how do we get what we want is different. But I think it's a really interesting, and they got to be fun characters to play. They just have
for sure.
They have to be fun to play. So, and I like that in the movie they made them. They've always been Folly Girls. That's how they met, and that continued through the whole original to this. But in the movie, you see them sing "Little Girl from A Girl from Little Rock" together. So like that was their routine, and then it gets brought back that they're penniless in France, and now they're gonna get money by going on, like, which is not part of the original Broadway musical at all. So like I love that bookends that, and that they have the means to, when they don't have rich men, to still make money. Like I really like that. I think that's kind of cool. That they were working girls who met and have had a bond for so long. So I thought that was really cool too. But I do have a fun fact.
Ooh, give us a closing fun fact.
I have a closing fun fact that I made sure I saved because I really, really liked it. In the song, Ain't There Anyone Here for Love? We have the Olympians, half naked, Jane Russell, all around. So Jane Russell's fall into the pool at the end was an accident.
Oh, what?
And if you look closely, she definitely is not expecting to get clocked in the head and knocked into the pool by someone who missed the jump.
Oh my gosh. But I did not look close enough. Get it, girl.
But she kept going and they pulled her out of the pool and she finished the number drenched and smiling. And they redid it, but then the director went, we're going to keep that tank.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So, I mean, one, for a famous superstar to be knocked into a pool by who knows extra dancer.
Right.
And then to continue the number and be pulled out is
soaking wet.
Soaking
like,
wet.
That'd be so uncomfortable, especially in the period clothes.
Yeah. Like the fact that she, one, didn't say stop, or two, like kept her smile on her face the entire rest of that number.
Bless.
Was like
a saint.
Like she must have had a great sense of humor, like to it ended up like that. And then she gets like brought up. Like it's just knowing that, just rewatch that number because it's hilarious to think about.
I have to now.
Complete accident. So that was fun. That's my fun fact.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us today on this episode of Damsels in Dialogue. So, do gentlemen really prefer blondes? And are diamonds really a girl's best friend? Let us know below. Thank you so much for coming.
See you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Damsels in Dialogue. Tune in next week as we go to the hills and try to solve a problem like Maria in Roger Hammerstein's classic Sound of Music.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, you can help us reach even more listeners by subscribing to the podcast and leaving a rating or comment on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you are listening.
If you want to join us for even more discussions and opinions about Gentlemen Prefer Blondes or any of our episodes, head over to our Patreon. There you can support the podcast and unlock an entire library of exclusive after-hour video podcasts with a new one arriving each month. You can also unlock research notes, bloopers, and more.
Follow us on social media and at our website on damselsindialogue.podbean.com. Until next time, this has been Damsels in Dialogue.
Have a nice day.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Royal Princess Parties LLC and is produced by Hello Out There Audio, part of Hello Out There Productions.